Hello Horizon Hobby fans, my name is Steve Petrato, Director of Marketing here at Horizon Hobby. And in today's video, I'm going to be discussing our thoughts on the FAA's proposal for remote ID. If enacted, the FAA's recently proposed rules would radically change how we enjoy traditional model aviation. For generations, our community has been the safest users of the national airspace, yet the FAA has proposed expansive rules to govern our activities that are impractical, costly, and intrusive. The FAA needs to hear your voice now more than ever. After watching this, please take the time to share your comments with the FAA on how the proposed rules will impact your life, using the links in the description. Model aviation supports a billion-dollar hobby industry, including tens of thousands of jobs in small businesses. Over the last several years, the industry has seen reduced involvement as a result of new regulations and uncertainty. Additional requirements for manufacturers and consumers could perpetuate a decline of our beloved model aviation hobby. In the FAA's most recent attempt to rein in drone users, traditional model aircraft pilots would bear the brunt of the proposed rules. The costly measures proposed by the FAA create a disproportionate, ineffective, and unworkable burden on modelers, while wasting limited FAA resources needed to protect the national airspace. Yet the sensible solution can be found in the competing recommendations in the FAA-created Aviation Rulemaking Committee, or ARC for short. The FAA should recognize the proven safety record of models by exempting unmanned aircraft without cameras or GPS navigation from the remote ID requirement. We all recognize the effect of modern consumer drones. The widespread use of camera-based quadcopter drones by casual consumers has proven harmful in rare cases, from closing airports to grounding planes fighting forest fires. The need for accountability of these drones is apparent and welcomed by their industry leaders. But our community and safety record sit in stark contrast with that of the casual camera drone consumer. For over 80 years, the model aviation community has built their aircraft and taken to the skies without disruption. We don't fly to capture a rare and potentially dangerous perspective from a drone in hopes of creating a viral video. We fly our models for the enjoyment of flying itself. This critical distinction is the reason modelers have already safely integrated into the national airspace decades ago. While drone users have caused a blowback of recent legislation and regulations, continuing to ignore this distinction has led to the FAA proposal that is intrusive, costly, and unworkable for model aviation. The FAA Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for Remote Identification and Unmanned Aircraft Systems centers around giving law enforcement tools to hold drone users accountable for illegal activities. To accomplish this, the FAA would require all models to be equipped with broadcast and network remote ID technologies, making flying nearly all models with current technology outside of an FAA-recognized flying field a criminal offense. Flying anywhere else would require a subscription service from a private supplier for each model aircraft you fly, who would record every second of you and your model's movement for every flight for at least 6 months. The FAA estimates this subscription service could cost up to $5 per model per month. The FAA is quick to point out that this implementation can be accomplished with most modern drones using only a software update. But the FAA leaves no simple upgrade path for traditional models. Instead, the FAA would have you install tamper-proof hardware in your model or restrict you to an FAA-recognized identification area, or FRIA for short. FRIAs would provide only a temporary refuge. Applications for these flying fields could only be sent to the FAA within the first year of the regulation's enactment, making it so that additional FRIAs could not be created. Eventually, this means FRIAs would cease to exist entirely if that FRIA were to close or move locations. The proposed rule would only allow yet-to-be-defined community-based organizations to apply for a FRIA registration. This leads us to the eventual goal of the proposal: every pilot paying for the hardware and services needing to send and record their location over the internet. Furthermore, the FAA is suggesting that all models over 0.55 pounds need to be registered in comparison to the per-user basis that we have today. Most model aviation enthusiasts have an average of 5 to 10 models in their fleet, and this would add significant cost burden to each modeler. The FAA's proposal fails to address how their remote ID solution can be accomplished in the modeling community. Under their plan, compliant models would need to be tamper-proof and unable to take flight unless broadcasting the model's remote ID and user's location. But unlike consumer drones, traditional RC aircraft are highly modular and continually being altered by modelers. Their solution for consumer drone accountability is unworkable in the model aviation community. Horizon Hobby provides completion levels across the spectrum, whether it be kits, ARF, PNP, BNF, or RTF. These systems have interchangeable transmitters, servos, batteries, receivers, and flight control units. Yet the current proposal would only require manufacturers to produce compliant RTFs. The apparent eventuality is that either the FAA must give up on mandatory compliance or create even more rules to restrict model parts and accessories. This would undoubtedly increase the cost of manufacturing components and aircraft, thereby increasing the cost of enjoying our hobby. We commend the FAA's goal of creating a safer airspace, while we disagree with their attempts to push the compliance costs onto modelers. We understand that this would be necessary given their limited budget, but it is for this reason that we find the inclusion of remote ID requirement for traditional model aircraft most concerning. The FAA's clearly stated goal is protecting the national airspace from recent unmanned aircraft threats, and their proposal cites numerous examples of drone users creating severe safety risks and violating protected airspace. Every incident occurred as a result of recent technological leaps and widespread use of smartphones, cameras, and GPS. Working Group Number 2 of the Remote ID ARC, made of military and law enforcement agencies, recognized this fact. They actually offered a simple solution that would focus the FAA's efforts on the users and aircraft causing the problems. They recommended an exemption for recreational flyers if the aircraft lacked camera or GPS capabilities for remote navigation. Their recommendation would free up valuable FAA resources to protect against incidents highlighted by the FAA and place the burden on the industry and users responsible and most capable of absorbing the costs. While the proposal includes several new burdens on modelers, the compulsory online service subscriptions and equipment would undoubtedly cost modelers the most. The consumer costs for this network solution include limited use of previously purchased models, purchasing yet to be developed hardware, and subscription costs for each model owned. Members of the model aviation community are not casual consumers. Many of our consumers own upwards of 100 models and regularly fly a substantial portion of them. Not only would the FAA proposal require a $5 registration for each model, but without a hardware upgrade, the models could be only flown at flying sites, indicating a lack of understanding of model aviation. The FAA believes your only cost for flying at the local club is an average 15-mile drive. Clearly, the drafters never paid annual dues to the AMA and their local flying club. That leaves only one option for park flyers, a hardware upgrade. Due to the many differences between consumer drones and traditional models, the FAA's network solution requires currently non-existent technology in model aircraft. The modular systems at the core of traditional model aircraft experience creates issues ignored by the FAA. Their system-wide checks and tamper-proof requirements are virtually incompatible with current modular aircraft. Once you add the cost for a CBO, registration fees, subscription fees, remote ID hardware, club membership fees, and the cost of transportation to and from a club, it becomes very apparent that the impact that each modeler would see. Horizon Hobby is committed to conserving traditional model aviation and working with the FAA to find safe and efficient solutions for our industry. We understand the need for safe skies and accountability. While Horizon will always provide compliant solutions, the current proposed rules have the potential to negatively impact the future of the RC hobby as we know it. Horizon Hobby does not support remote ID as written. We also do not support per aircraft registration, the lack of flexibility for FRIAs, and requirements placed on the manufacturer under the current proposal. Please join us in commenting on the FAA proposal for remote ID before March 2nd, 2020. There are barely more than 10,000 comments so far from the entire UAS community. Your voice will be heard. To make an impactful comment, we highly recommend you do not copy and paste someone else's comment to increase its effectiveness upon review. Thank you for your time, and rest assured, we'll keep you updated as things progress.